Pav, welcome to Tasty Humans.
Thank you, brother. It's good to be here, man.
Powered by What's On,
Yeah.
here, Media One Hotel. Thank you so much for doing this. In case no one knows who you are, you were part of what I personally, being a music lover, think is one of the best UK urban hip-hop bands, or I suppose band is not the right word, but to come out of the UK in the early noughties and everything. I mean, how would you describe, what you guys in the Foreign Beggars achieved?
I think, we did bits. Let's just say we did bits. You know what I'm saying? I think a beautiful thing about the time when I started as an MC and then I moved to London with that intention, it was a very competitive time for the art form, so it was very much about individualism, and I mean, there was definitely about community building, but it's all about it's about your individual style. You don't really copy what other people are doing. And then it's all about like how far you can take it, how far you can break the rules by respecting the rules, if you know what I mean, with hip hop. So I feel with that intention, it was very much, okay, I want to move back to London and be a part of a scene, but it was also, right, how am I going to crush all of these other rappers, This is in, so I started rapping in 96.
Okay.
And I started MCing when I was over here. And my first kind of foray into understanding hip-hop culture and the whole mentality behind it was through graffiti. So I started writing graffiti before. So understanding style, understanding upness, understanding, taking what's there, flipping it respectfully and bringing something back to the table. I kind of understood that before I started rapping. So that was a really interesting, and I think the people around me were almost fascist on the level of like how hardcore they were with style related issues. You know what I'm saying? So you could not be mediocre in any way, shape or form when it came to the graffiti. I remember when I first started writing, my mate would make me paint around the corner because he didn't want to be near my toy styles,
Mm-hmm.
He'd let me help him do the fillings, but he wouldn't let me paint anywhere near him until my shit was good enough,
Okay.
So that's kind of where that understanding of how important not being mediocre is in terms of anything to do with hip hop was for me. So moving to London, it was again a very competitive art form. I think also not being from there, also those times being an Indian person looking like me. I mean, there weren't so many in the scene. It was either, there was different archetypes of humans that were very much forefront in these types of scenes. So being an Indian dude, people were already thinking, what's this? And, but yeah, so I think the fact that people were a little bit unassuming also kind of added to the surprise factor a little bit, catching people off guard. But anyway, I'm rambling.
No, it's cool. I mean, the late 90s, the thing is, the late 90s, the MC culture was coming out of the rave era.
Yeah.
And the MCs were always, because there was never a UK hip-hop scene. And then it transcended where, sort of from my recollection, it was where sort of garage came along. And then it came off the stage and more into that type of... It's where rapping became... Not just the American culture was Snoop and Dre and guns and weed and pimps and hoes and everything like this. So the UK is very difficult to get a tone into it because we didn't have that.
Yeah, actually, I see what you're saying about it was kind of through post jungle, through garage. It kind of became a widespread youth movement that kind of had its own identity, which is where grime comes from.
Yeah,
but there's definitely been UK hip hop scene in terms of dating all the way back to end of the 80s, early 90s. So if we go as far back as just London Posse, for example, people before London Posse, but London Posse were the first people to actually represent the London accent, the UK accent, the UK flavour. Do you know what I mean? Their side of the sound system culture, their side of British Jamaican energy as well. So I think from then there has been a real strong hip hop movement, but I think it took a little bit of time to find its voice because hip hop was such a especially vocally and with the movements and stuff, it was a very Americanized way of expressing yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think there was a big disparity there. But I think as things slowly changed over the years through the 90s, you know what I mean? I think in terms of, there was a way more racist place back then as well, and there was a lot more it's interesting because there's so much cultural exchange with England and Britain, and it's not like everybody was like that, but there was definitely, boundaries. It wasn't necessarily a segregation issue like in America, but it's a bit deeper and a bit more insidious. But at the same time, it was such a deep melting pot, places like London, places like Bristol, Manchester, Birmingham. But so it's this, there were the tensions. Like, for example, now, I can walk through any part of London. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to suddenly find myself in a weird NF pub, in Bermondsey, or, in Lewisham, or even in, maybe some parts of Tufnell Park is still a bit like that. But generally, even if I did end up in one of those places, it's not that anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
but it definitely
I
used
do
to
remember I've got friends who would just walk past the wrong pub and it would be warfare, like bicycle chains and all of that kind of stuff. So, and I think even in the era that we came up, like, there was a lot of, you doing that rapping thing?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you're doing the rapping? You know what I mean? So it's all a bit like, and I think, you see, like, if we watch TV now and you see people like Piers Morgan who've got this kind of super, kind of like semi-like elitist, top-down kind of entitled voice, he's like PG in comparison to just what your normal TV presenters were back then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the Sun newspaper, the Daily Mail, that was, even the Telegraph, all of the spin. Even I remember when I really understood how like right-wing Sky News was and all of those types of things. And even the Metro and the newspaper, when it's like, for a lot of people, they, when they'll read, like, rather than somebody who's done something, it's somebody who looks like me, and it describes exactly where they're from, how long they've been in the country, what they're wearing, what their mum's name was, so it kind of really attaches the othering to people who look like me. And it was only when I was only like, even after a few years of being there, I mean, I went to school in England when I was between the ages of 10 and 16, and this is like 1990 to 96, so I saw a lot then. But then it's different because you're younger, and but then when you're older and you think things are normal in the newspaper, they're not being like that. There, you see how insidious the left, the right, the spin is on TV. So I think that was something that really kind of held a lot of artists back from really putting themselves out there from my generation, because, for example, if they did get massive, or they, like, there was points where people from my generation, like Jest or Kalashnikov or Task Force or Skinny Man, these are seminal artists, Roots Maneuver, Black Twang, their music still bangs today. But I feel like, by them taking that step and accepting to go on those media platforms, that in those times, it would have just been a setup for them to fail.
Yeah, I hear what you mean.
Because the UK loves to build people up and tear them down. But I would say from about 95, 96, there was a really strong kind of British voice that came into it with the subcultures that were there. Because, in terms of, post-Windrush generation, the whole, the integration of loads of Asian people in Birmingham and the music that was happening there, the sound system culture that's been there now since the late 70s, 80s, early 80s, was really a thing. And there's a big Jamaican, there's a big Caribbean population in the UK who did get that segregation and weren't allowed to go into clubs, who built their own subcultures now. So dub music, reggae music, Notting Hill Carnival, dancehall music, from dancehall music, from like, we're talking, when like Shabba Ranks and Rad Cobra was, on TV and in the radio, that was like, what, 91, 92, 93. Now there's a widespread understanding of what this is, and it's, like, look, if you look at videos from Carnival from about 94, and you got Saxon Sound and Coxsone and, and Jungle starting to emerge, and there's the whole anti-establishment thing going on with rave culture. It was like,
well, rave culture brought everyone together.
Yeah.
I think that the great sort of, because I was 14 in 1990, so I had elder stepsisters that were into acid house and stuff like that, and that kind of that was my gateway into rave. And looking back, it's clear that it ended the football hooliganism of the late 80s because of the ecstasy culture.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Of what happened, which was, as you say, the clash of music that all came together into the rave era. Like if you listen to any, I think anyway, if you listen to any dance music now, you can trace it back to all of those where it's all broken up now into so many different genres. If you listen to like the happy hardcore of like 1990, 91, you can hear it. You can hear jungle, you can hear drum and bass, you can hear house, you know.
You hear everything.
It was a brilliant
everything's
time,
come from that. You know, there's that, it's between that acid house, it's that, literally that acid house movement, which kind of, that was like the primordial juice that kind of took everything all the way from psytrance to, you know, to jungle, to hardcore, to techno, to all of that stuff. I mean, there was definitely, you know, concurrent kind of undercurrents happening, like, you know, in the States or Detroit, you know, people like Drexciya and, you know, Stingray and those people who were doing their thing, which kind of dates back to the 80s boogie, like electro boogie era of electronic music, you know. So there's those, I just love seeing how all of these weird strands and patterns are all happening, like collective consciousness just crystallizing in different ways. You know what I mean? With your limited bits of technology. But yeah, so coming back to that era I think it was really important because, again, like it brought everybody together in a way, because I think that was kind of what mid to late Thatcher era, when everybody felt like a level of austerity that they hadn't felt since the world wars, you know. And I think it was like that level of, it's the first time I think, I don't know, definitely not the first time, but I think for that generation who really were looking something, it was like, you know, punk rock, you know, that's what, you know, punk rock, and you know, like the 60s freedom movement, then, you know, the kind of, you know what, punk was like early 80s, wasn't it? It was at 70s.
Punk late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah,
was
so
punk,
I think,
you know, Sex Pistols, stuff like that.
So we've come from the 60s, you know, the love era, you know, everyone's taking acid. That's one generation above. Now, by the time you get to the 80s, you know, that's our parents' generation who'd been through, you know, the, you know, end of the 50s, the 60s, that era. So they've seen a lot of things, and then that's kind of when a lot of race relations started happening. As much as there was like tension, there was still a lot of, this is where a lot of understanding came from. I think the 60s and that whole hippie movement did a lot for Indian people in certain ways, you know, like you got Freddie Mercury,
down massive amounts of boundaries, where that was again like an early notion of our rave era, which was, it doesn't matter what you look like, we're all getting together to have a shared experience of music and God knows what.
Yeah, and then I think as things kind of continued on, people became a bit more, I would say militant, but they became a bit more anti-establishment because of, like, you know, that was the era when, you know, all Vietnam was going on, and, you know, UK was doing whatever the hell it was doing. But, you know, the Vietnam era kind of gave rise to like a bit more of a, yo, what's going on here in America anyway. So I think with that, with the austerity in England, punk music coming through, and I think the fact that punk and hip hop were both very anti-establishment, rebellion types of music that were kind of born out of, you know, the youth generation being ignored and treated like they're stupid, they don't know what they're talking about, being gassed, for using normal new woke terms, but you know, like
you're 100% right,
being gaslighted, they're like, fuck off, you know what I mean? Like, so I think, and that's the kind of, and that was in the early 80s, and I think now by the time you get to the 90s, we're in a situation where, let's say we're in 92, we've got Nirvana, right? We've got Snoop Dogg. This is 2 years after NWA. We've got Acid House. You've got Acid House turning into hardcore. Rage Against the Machine is doing its thing. You've got death metal, which has been around for 10 years. You know, I mean, John Peel played Napalm Death on Radio 1 in 81, right? So you've got this whole movement and different subsects and subcultures of anti-establishment situations that are going on. I think like that was, you know, 92, I think Public Enemy was still going strong. Public Enemy, before they kind of...
Yeah, Public Enemy were top of the political hip-hop movement for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that in 93, the Criminal Rights Justice Bill, I remember this clearly, where all the raves, all the outdoor raves had to end. They brought in all these silly regulations about cars in convoys and illegal parties, and
Groups of 10 people.
groups of 10 people can't walk down the street together, and all of this stuff. And I think that, again, as you say, the ability for the government to try and control it actually kick-started something new, which was
Free parties.
it all became very rebellious. Because everyone went, fuck you.
Can't stop this,
Right,
man.
you can't stop this.
Especially when it's like finally something that's unifying people.
Exactly.
You can see the positive element.
And there was peace between people. Like I said, it ended the hooligan era. So,
That's crazy, man.
but then you sort of, so I think what you've just said, all of it is really awesome, because it shows, I've always wanted to ask, like I say, very successful MCs, you know, how do you translate all of that into the music? You know, like when you sit, because one thing with the Beggars is that the range of what you did, how many different tunes you've actually put out there, which we'll sort of get to with the noisier stuff and everything like that. But I listen to it all the time, and I always think to myself, it sounds like you guys are having fun. Like there's sarcasm. Your metaphors are ridiculously good. There is arrogance. There is cockiness in it, but it's not what I would refer to as angry.
Yeah.
You know, it's
okay. So there's different ways of channeling it, right?
Yeah.
Now it's interesting because we were having a conversation. You were talking about Dubai incidentally becoming like the new freedom of speech place for comedians.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's
which is
me, yeah.
insane for me to hear, because, you know, for me, it's interesting because being an Indian person, just an Indian person growing up here, and with my parents coming from a certain generation that they come from, there's a lot of presentation involved. Do you know what I mean? So you have to be careful in a place like Dubai, which is smaller. And my dad, for example, he was here a long time ago. So he's quite like, you know, he was one of the first Indian people to be here. So in terms of people knowing him, you know, there was always an emphasis on how we navigate ourselves in public and what you can say and what you can't say. And I always felt that was really oppressive, you know. It's different with my mum because she's from San Francisco. So she's already, you know, she feels that as well, you know. So there's always been that tension. And I've always it's interesting also having gone to British school in the 80s over here. There was very much children are supposed to be seen and not heard. You know, you're wearing your socks wrong, get slapped from the headmistress, Miss McCarthy. You know, all of that kind of stuff. Don't stand out of line, don't stick out. You got just like blend in as much as possible. Fortunately, like my mom can't blend in, but I don't even think my dad can blend in. So we were already, you know, and then having been brought up on anti-establishment music by an anti-establishment person, you know, in the 80s when fluorescent colours were all coming out and we got Technotronic on TV and we're listening to Motley Crue, and then suddenly you got MC Hammer and NWA and Anthrax. You know, like we're 10 years old. Like other kids are probably listening to Jason Donovan. We were listening to... Do you know what I mean? Like we were listening... We'd been listening to Michael Jackson for 6 years and Prince, and now we were listening to Motley Crue and Anthrax and Public Enemy and NWA and Ice Cube and Two Live Crew. So this is the spectrum of reference that we've got in 1988, 89, 90, Public Enemy, Alice in Chains, and you know, because, and then we're starting to understand, oh, you can't get any of these tapes in Dubai. This is all underground stuff. This is the stuff you can't get here. Why can't you get it? Censorship laws, this and that. So we're all like saying, oh, you can't get that, fucking I want some of that, you know. So we're starting to, you know, seek out stuff. We end up with like, you know, Shut Up and Dance tapes with Ragga Twins on it, and anybody coming to town, hey, can you record this show on this, you know, like these mythical radio shows where they play swearing, you know, like, so we'd already started this underground collection of stuff, and then, you know, all the kids in the school, they'd be listening to Vanilla Ice, and, you know, so that was all wicked, but, you know, it was interesting seeing these two, the existence of the underground.
There was the commercial and there was the underbelly.
So we was
always Vanilla Ice was a rapper.
Chasing the naughty stuff.
Yeah.
So now, it was weird when we got sent to boarding school in England because the Gulf War broke out here. Got sent to a very super Christian establishment, and in the same week, the first week that we were there, we found a Kerrang magazine with a 10-inch on it. So it was a religious studies teacher who took us there. So in the morning we're singing hymns and psalms. We bought this Kerrang magazine, and now we've just suddenly discovered Obituary and Deicide and Napalm Death and the most satanic death metal groups from Sweden and Florida in the same 2-3 weeks. So we had to hide it from all the other kids because obviously they would take the piss out of us because it was Lord of the Flies that time. Literally, it was brutal. Went home and then we discovered death metal. So now suddenly we're these weird Indian kids with American accents in a super Christian school in England from Dubai, like hiding satanic scriptures. I don't know. So it's just. I don't know. It's just. So then from there, we always had a push. Sorry, just coming back to your question.
Yeah. I mean, but this is the most important stuff.
Yeah.
Is what gets you to this point. You know.
Yeah. So I think coming back to just what we. So from then on, we just wanted to make music. So my brothers and I, we've been, again, I saw you at the show the other night, Surge's The Verdict show.
Yeah.
Like we kind of been doing death metal in Dubai since, 92, 93, 94. And our house here, we had this room outside. So all the kids from all the schools used to come to our house. There'd be days when there's 35 kids in our house, 3 bands in the back room, one after the next, one after the next, one after the next, and just doing all sorts.
What did you play?
I played bass,
Okay.
guitar, and then I started rapping in about 96. So I think, yes, coming back to what you say about what we rap about and how to be, I think the fact that we're so involved in this, this is why I've gone on this tangent.
Mm-hmm.
It's because, being from here, you have to behave yourself. It's because you're on, I'm on borrowed time here, so being, growing up here, you're not, as an Indian person, you're not necessarily from here. So anybody who comes to Dubai, you know what the rules are. You've got to behave yourself. Don't piss around. If you want to piss around, piss off and do it somewhere else. You know? So you got to respect what it is here. We're very lucky to have what we have, but you have to respect it. And of course, you know what I mean? You got to respect it. So when it comes to back in the day and then suddenly being into all of this anti-establishment stuff and then also understanding, different things about the way different societies work and being an Indian person here and seeing the imbalance with what the kind of shit that my, friends, not even British white friends necessarily, people with UK passports or different passports can get away with, or the salary imbalance, or seeing those things play out in front of me, and not necessarily even from the perspective of, the local people, is how the people who have those privileges behave and suddenly become this position of entitlement. Like I remember coming back from clubs, and I see the way English people, some geezer from Manchester is talking to Pakistani taxi driver. And I'm thinking, bro, you can't chat to anybody like that in England. You wouldn't be in Oldham and be chatting to Uncle
100%.
Ahmed like
And it
that.
still
But you
happens.
would disappear, bro.
And it still happens here.
And it's just assuming these positions. So being on this side of the world and seeing that kind of stuff really triggered me, right? So, but then also not really being able to say anything because it's not your place here, So suddenly finding a fact that I can't even stand up for people who are being, treated like that. I can, but if I was to get into an altercation with him, suddenly it would be, do you know what I mean? Like, he would get the benefit of the doubt and I'd end up in, locked up for it. So I know things are different now and there's a lot more balance, and also because it's a much more worldly place, nobody knows who is who, but it was much more apparent back then. And that really, really struck me hard. For example, going to a place and there's an Indian guy at the door, and he's letting all of my whatever friends from wherever in, and he'll stop me because he wants to keep the place looking white or whatever. I'm just talking about rock bottom specifically. We'd be going there and then he would let everybody in. He wouldn't let me in. Then he would say, "You're not a member." I'm like, "None of them are members." He'd be like, "Yeah, but your shoes, you're wearing." I'm like, "You see now all of these fuckers have just walked in, what they're wearing." And then he would try and charge me $200. But this is an Indian guy at the door speaking to me. But the manager's an English geezer, So it's like, these things blew my mind, and not being able to express myself. And then finding hip hop for me was a means to really be like, okay, but understanding that your message will get across if you respect the art form and you do it in a way that nobody's done and bring something back to the culture.
See, you said respect the art form 4 times since we started.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Just understand what the protocols are. With hip hop, there's very specific, like, I wouldn't say rules, but there's, there's templates of understanding what's what, and, by there being parameters and boundaries, you can define what's good and what's not, you know, because otherwise anybody can come on and do any kind of
So what
rhyme.
do you mean, though?
You know, for example,
give
with,
an example.
all right,
about,
so
like,
with
a template.
all right, so
of
with
writing lyrics for a hip hop tune.
I'll give you an example with graffiti first. So graffiti, there's two things that define whether somebody's going to get respected or not as a graffiti artist, right? It's your hand style, it's your tag style, how you do your letters, right? And it's by knowing what's dope and what's not in the art form, you can then take the letters and change the game and bring something that nobody's seen before. Like somebody might do, it might be the whole tag and the way it moves, it stops, and like how quickly it was done, but also the movement and the synchronicity with the letters, but then also, oh, I've never seen somebody do an E like that before. Oh, like, you know, you see like letter shape and be like, whoa, becomes a conversation with peace, like, oh, did you see the S that guy done there? So there's one thing about the style, but then there's also the upness, the risk and the danger of where you put it and how much you're up.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah,
So these are those with graffiti's like, you know, putting it in places where, you know, be like, that dude's just crazy. But to be able to do that with the crazy style, those things, like, for example, you could take, there's certain legends in London. I'm not necessarily going to name them because I don't want to, you know, but they're not really concerned with style, but they're just concerned with being up everywhere in the most insane places, and just you can see that they are risking their life on a daily basis. They're risking their future. They're just basically risking it all for this, and like that, what I see. So that even though the style isn't there, the fact that they're getting up so much and they're pushing the culture that much, that's what I call that respecting the art form, you know. So when it comes to rap music, it's about, you know, being on an individual level, but understanding, just pushing it a little bit further, you know, seeing what's been done. You don't necessarily have to be the frontline groundbreaker, but at least do it in a way that's well, you know what I mean? Hip hop is very much about what you can do for the culture, not what it can do for you. You know, obviously you could do that and flex and get by and this and that, but I think it's like the interesting thing with hip hop, with rap music especially, it's kind of, when people say giving a voice to the voiceless, it's very much that, you know. For example, if I really respect the art form and my pen game with like the rhymes and the, you know, just the way that I write, the way that I, you know, the intonation, how concise, how interestingly I can get my point across, you know, and have like layers of understanding and meaning for it to connect with different people. Like, the more I respect that and the more I put it down on a track which is sonically interesting or groundbreaking, whatever, you know, that you can you can choose any type of beat. You can choose something gully, you can choose something sweet to say something, and it's your interpretation of existence and putting that and expressing your individual perspective, but also using it to connect with people. Now, say for example, a lot of the music I've made, especially back then, you know, and what I'm saying, I had to take it a step further because of this whole freedom of speech thing. So I can't say things in the States because I've got an Indian passport. I can't say things in the UK. I've never been able to express myself. I've never been able to fully just come out and call my track what I want to call it, you know, on like on the nose level, because, or even from here, just because it is what it is. So I've had to be a lot more creative with it. Now, the fact that I've had to do that when I put it down, because this thing is so magical, and it's just the generation that we live in, is that music just travels, you know. It's like, you know, whether it's radio or even before internet or CDs will end up, or burnt CDs or tapes, it's connecting with somebody somewhere. So like, in the same way that I was hearing Public Enemy as a child and going, what is this? Or hearing NWA or Two Life Crew and being like, what is this? Oh, you can do that? You can say it, you know? And the thing is, like, you can say it and it will get to where it needs to get to, is the most beautiful thing. So by respecting the art form, the more you respect the art form, the further it's going to travel, because the more people who are into the art form, and it's an entire diverse gamut of people who are into the art form, and it's the art form that's bringing people together, you know, your perspective is going to travel further and it's got more chance of connecting with people. That's not necessarily what I was thinking when I was doing it. I was just like, I just want to bring my A game and do this and da-da-da-da-da-da. But incidentally, it's like when you do stuff that pushes it further, like if you look at artists like Philippe Pantone, or you look at Okuda, or you look at, like, you know, Cleon Peterson. You look at artists who are really breaking ground with what they do. It goes further because it's something that people have never seen that perspective on it before. You know.
Well, I think, when you talk about breaking ground, I think an interesting point I personally want to ask you is the noisier stuff.
Yeah.
Which was your early stuff is I mean, I can't stress it enough. Like I say, I think it's so underrated. And I don't know, in fact, I want to ask actually, did you purposely keep it extremely underground? Did you turn down any major labels or major opportunities because you wanted to not sort of say quote unquote sell out or anything like that?
I tell you,
did these opportunities come your way or
a couple did. What was interesting in the beginning is I wasn't really. It was a weird catch-22 situation where I wasn't allowed to be an artist in the UK at the time, because when I left uni to do music full time, I had a tourist visa. So I was kind of back and forth between there and here. So I was trying to get it popping, but once it actually started kicking off, I wasn't actually once my accolades were enough for me to apply for a visa, I couldn't, because of the catch-22 situation, because I had to show that I was a famous artist in my country of residence, which was here. And, in 01, 02, there was no big rap scene here, so it was this weird kind of balance. So I kind of had to not go into them big offices and all of that kind of stuff. So even with the business, I had to not have any of the businesses in my name. They had to be in my partner's name in England and all of that kind of stuff. So it was a strange thing, kind of having this thing where opportunities are coming, but I can't fully say yes because now I've been here for a while. Or if I tell the booking agent that I don't have a UK residence, they're going to drop me, and is that my whole career getting dropped, So that was a real weird thing to balance. There was one time after our first album came out, we got a call from this guy called Goatee or something. Mm-hmm. And he was like, yeah, I'm on this big management company. We look after Incognito. We look after someone. Basically nice, sexy management company before I even knew what management was properly. Calls us in for a meeting because he was gassing it on the fucking emails and the phone calls. I was like, all right, wicked. Go to this meeting now in their offices in Camden. And it's an Indian dude, right? Interesting. When I got there, he was looking at me like, where's the band? I'm like, this is the fucking band, bro. But from he was looking at me as an Indian dude, the whole shit changed. And it was like, he kind of just gave us a bit of lip service for 15, 20 minutes. And he gave us a couple CDs, like, all right, on your way, boys. And I was like, yo, it was such a blatant switch from how he was being. So, I don't know. I think also the UK at the time, major labels did not know how to deal with rap acts. So, the independent scene was really beautiful. Everyone was putting out vinyl. There was a point, Bad Company, Fresh, he put out Planet Dust, bro. They sold 270,000 copies of that 12-inch. People was making money without needing to go to any major labels. Major labels was, it was a post-garage thing when it was turning into this weird fucking pop. And it was getting to the point where, early 2000s, that's when formulaic music
This was what I was going to ask. When that garage thing, So Solid Crew, those guys, that transcended into the charts and went a little bit...
Yeah.
And then you had Dizzy and Plan B and all that, but it's going... And sort of grime is going into the... I was... God, what was I? Late 20s, early 30s. So I was almost past it. I was looking at it from I was running clubs and bars and stuff like that. So I was just looking at it as music, like what are DJs playing and new sounds that are coming out. Yeah. I wasn't, like a teenager going, oh, these are big bands. But when it comes to you guys, it's like, were you ever close to that? Because I think you're better. Yeah. Like you've had these huge artists where even Stormzy and all these guys now, which I don't listen to, but I know how big they are. But if you go and listen to your stuff, I'm sorry, it's better. It is.
Cheers, thank you.
No, but it's. And I'm not saying it because you're sitting there. I'm saying it because I'm a big music freak and definitely into the hip hop and a lot of old school hip hop. But it's like I said, I'm always surprised how many people haven't heard of the Foreign Beggars. So it's like, did you? Well, so how did it stay so under the radar for something that's so good?
I'll tell you what it was, right? So obviously we came out before the internet was really a thing.
Yeah.
You know, so it was all like outside shot in, you know, flyers, posters, all of, you know, that generation of music, you know. You know, put our first record, running around record stores and all that stuff. It was super active, right? And I think we did our first album, and it was just basically just kept plugging away, and everything that we did was received pretty decently for a long until Contact, right? Until that point in our career, everything was received really decently. Radio played, this and that, Zane Lowe, Radio 1, Tim Westwood, you know, like, but we still kept it underground without having to do stuff. We didn't really get bookings at the beginning. We started putting our own shows on, and, you know, just knew a lot of people from different scenes. So our shows were bigger than other people's shows, and we were putting on all the other acts. So, you know, like in the jungle scene back in the day, you come in as like, you know, record label, DJ, or a promoter, or, you know, and you have to be bringing something. So that was a template I took. So I was like, fuck it, we'll throw our own parties, make them bigger than everyone, and then we'll be headlining. We're going to mark everyone's show. Our records are already doing most, and we're also made it a point to be consistent and prolific with the releases. So with that, and then us starting to put our own tours on, that was a way that we kind of came in the game and then kind of stepped it up, because we had a different work ethic. For me, like, I always imagined, I'd see like Pantera, boom, album out, world tour. So that was what I was imagining from the beginning. So I was always imagining we put a release out, we tour. So we started getting bigger and bigger. And then also, I know from the graffiti days, I knew loads of people from different countries, because graffiti people travel and they paint and they build community like that in the shadows or whatever. But then they have these big jams. A lot of the UK hip hop people, the rap people, they just stayed in one place. They didn't really travel too much. But for me, I was already like, we were, right, boom, all my Spain crew, all my Norway crew, all my front, like that was very much that, and coming here and travel. I just love making connections, so that's how we grew it. And it was only until we dropped the Noisier thing that we didn't, I invested properly in that. That's the first time I paid like £1,000 for the promo CDs and a nice casing, because it was a smasher. Gave it to all the DJs in the UK. The only piece of, I even paid a big radio plug. The only piece of feedback I got for that song was Annie Mac going, I don't really like the vocal. That was it. And it was kind of
how did you meet Noisier? So a very good friend of mine, he won't mind me saying this, name is Andrew Collinson, got me into Noisier. I was a big Prodigy fan.
Yeah.
From that, he actually was a big drum and bass head, and we became very close friends. He introduced me to Chase and Status, and then Noisier, like as music. Noisier were incredibly unusual, really really experimental, and I remember Contact was the first time I discovered Foreign Beggars.
Yeah.
And I just thought, what a fucking tune that is. Like,
that is like that Prodigy style.
Yeah, and that's where I saw, I've always thought, anyone that knows me knows I'll put the Prodigy up here, right? But it's always who can make the most noise in my head. It's like, who comes on stage and just wants to blow everybody, out of the room. And Contact and Noisier, and it's just, that is an absolute fucking mega tune.
Yeah.
And I even on one of your albums, I think Metropolis, who we've not mentioned, who's the other MC in the group, he actually says a line where he says something like, everything was this, and then we dropped Contact, now everyone wants to be our friend. Something like that. So I feel that was a change of a direction in your career. So
it was definitely changed. Yeah, definitely changed a lot. I think linking up Noisier, insane. Like, they came, imagine 3 Dutch dudes, like, they didn't even speak English properly at the time, came into drum and bass, which is probably one of the most heavily guarded scenes. Very, big flexing. No, can't come here. You want to come in here, you got to give me 50 records on my, that type of flex. They came in the game and just fucked it up, basically. They just made, you have certain, I think over the years, certain artists have come in the game and just flipped the whole shit on its head. I think in the early 90s, between 93 and 98, every single artist was like, that's probably the most some of the most seminal times between like 93 and 2000, because you got, you know, Ed Rush, Optical, Total Science, you got Photech, you've got, you know,
who's the other Aphex Twin?
Oh, come on, Aphex Twin was even in the mix, but you know, in those days it was like you got Square pushing, Ortec are pushing bounds, you got David Bowie trying to get in, you know, you've got Renegade Hardware starting, you've got Goldie, basically everybody, and I think that era of music, no matter what genre, and I think a lot of these people come from that hip hop mentality as well. It's like you've got to bring your own style to the table.
But Noisia did stuff where they had an album.
Yeah,
I remember that, and they'd have tracks that were like 1 minute 20 seconds.
And
it's just them just making noise.
That was later down the line. But when they came in, Noisia came in and they shat on the whole game.
So how did you meet them? Like, who approached who? Like
they were traveling in France, and between two shows, and the promoter was playing our CD to them. They just basically played our whole album of silent speakers between one show and the next show. They were trying to find people to work with, and they were like, "Who the fuck are these people?" So then they were trying to get in touch with us. This is just before AIM, you know. I didn't even know if we had Skype then. It was before AIM. It was still MSN Messenger probably before that. So I was DJ Go from the Mixologists and +1 from the Scratch Perverts. They kept on messaging me going, "Yo, these guys Noisia, they want to get in touch with you." And I'm like, "All right, cool, yeah, wicked." And after 2 or 3 times, I was like, "All right, cool, wicked. Here, I'm on this thing called AIM now. Give them my AIM address." And then Tice, we start speaking on AIM. And then he sends me Split the Atom, and he wants to work. So this is about 2006.
Great album. Great,
oh yeah.
Great
so then
tune.
he said, so we were speaking and we're going back and forth a bit, and then we were at Glastonbury, and my brother, Ebo Metropolis, rest in peace, and it was them, and I think I don't even think dude was our manager, but it was about 2000. Anyway, it was them. And they bumped into Noisia. So Walter and Noisia, they all linked up, and they were all partying. I don't know what I was, Glastonbury, bruv. Like, yeah, I mean, flight mode. I was away.
I've been there, yeah.
Anyway, so then they come back and they're like, "Yeah, we met Noisia, we got a full relationship with them now." And I was like, wicked. Anyway, so they were like, right, we were speaking. They were like, "You know what? Why don't you guys just fly to Groningen, come here and meet us, and we'll do it in the studio here." So Ebo and I just came back from that Glastonbury. I think it was a few weeks later. Just said, "All right, cool." Boom, bought the tickets, flew to Holland. Spent the day trying to make that Split the Atom tune, which is what their album was called. We put the verses down. Just basically, it was one of those ones where like they wanted the perfect hook, and so we spent the whole day writing hooks. Same thing the next day. 48 hours, and it was just like, guys, there's so many options here, but you guys are being kind of noisy, as very like. You know what I mean? They would be.
They strike me a bit almost like professors.
Let us be a bit far beggars about it. Okay, say, fuck it. Anyway, so we didn't get a hook in the end with that. It was fine. Anyway, but then I think we made a couple of other tunes, and we went away, and it was like, this is sick. Then we came back next time, and tried again to write this hook. Tried again. Didn't work. Like after 2 days of frustration, we were like, fuck it, let's just make some tunes. So then we just started messing around, and then Tice was like, "Oh, we got this electro-y sounding thing," or what is Tice or Martine, one of them. Start messing around, and then the beat for Contact came on, because it was around that time when like the Fidget House, electro, Boys Noise, I think it was just still starting to come together. I don't know about Boys Noise, maybe it was like more the Fidget era, and earlier, super early Ed Banger. I think there's some Sebastian influence in there if you listen. I don't know. Anyway, so we were hearing that, and it was like, all right, then. So then me and Ebo just we write a hook. Yeah, we run that, drop raw, run the chat for the combo. And then he was like, yeah, I'm on that. So I just came with that hook, because it was like, I think there's definitely some Dizzy Rascal influence in the hook, like the way that we're flipped. No, I was like, yeah, we run that, drop raw, run the chat for the, that kind of like, that super skippy. And then Ebo came with the response, and then was like, all right, this is a vibe, yeah. So we put the chorus down, and they were like, yeah. And then they started writing the beat, and then we were like, all right, boom, go. Wrote the verses in about 8 to 12 minutes each, put it down. Tune was done in an hour. And then basically, then we did another 2 tunes. We did Shake It, we did something else. And it was like, oh, that was a bit of a successful trip. Yeah, we got these 3 new tunes, pissed off back to England. And we was like, at that point, we're like, all right, we've got 5-6 tunes, we should make an album. And then, they're busy, we're busy, going back and forth. Anyway, so that tune ended up sitting on my hard drive for about 2.5 years. While we're talking, we're still building
before it was released.
Yeah.
Or...
And so we made that tune in 2007.
Okay.
In an hour.
Because it's a monster.
Yeah. So we made it, boom, next, whatever. Then we'd gone back a couple times, and there was like, all right, so now we're sitting on 5 or 6 belters, but they're doing their big noisier masterpieces got to come first, and like he's getting delayed and this and that, and it's like for us, it's like we got, it was like between Straight Point Agenda. Now it's like, guys, it's 3. Like back in the day, before the early days internet, you could have 3 years before an album. That was a general lifespan, Like a press PR run would have to, that would last 5-6 months before the shits even come out, So different time frames, like now it's about 30 seconds.
Yeah,
but
I made it release.
Anyway, so it came to the point where like we were putting our album out. We decided that we wanted to go a little bit more electronic with everything and kind of embrace this, like this new wave of shit that was going on.
Yeah, because I was going to say there is that moment in your albums where it goes from that to that, and you can clearly see the electronic influence. Was that a big risk?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Within maybe what you refer to as the rules of hip hop, was that like you guys going, right, we might get seriously banned for this?
Oh, we did. We got serious slack, but every single thing we did, we got slack for somebody who wanted us to be something else. So I think even if you listen to Begatron, that's still a purely hip hop album.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things where we deviated with, entering 140 without sample based, beats, and it not being hip hop and now being kind of grime, dubstep, fully electronic.
Well, dubstep was
it was
an interesting sound that turned up, which you guys got heavily into.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, we've always been messing with. See, like those days is like we were kind of in between all the scenes, so all of these people were our mates, and it was just like, oh, these mates. Because even when Foreign Beggars first started, we were Foreign Beggars was like putting our first records out in 2002, 2003. Bro, I've been into jungle since 95, 96. I've been into garage since 96. I've been into raving to hard house and seeing when speed garage showed up, and then seeing when hard step. You know what I mean? Like we've been.
Well, you've done but you've done hip hop, dubstep, drum and bass, house, breakbeat, and the proper breakbeat, like the 138 BPMs type breakbeat. And it's just that you've managed to position yourselves on every different type of beat, and it's a success. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't. Like I said, I've been a big fan for a long time. So when I discovered all this, it's not like. Because I can be hypercritical as a fan.
Yeah, of course,
I can be hypercritical, But so it's not like I've ever gone, oh no, that's not them.
Well, you know what it is? I think it's because we've come from hip hop, right? And understanding hip hop, but also kind of understanding dance music and the evolution of, like for me, like if you listen to Two Live Crew, Miami bass, that's kind of dance music keys, kind of like a lot. You know what I mean? If you listen to where garage is at, or even the way that all the early garage MCs were rapping, they were rapping like MCs from the 80s.
Very slow.
You know what I mean?
It's very
they're
slow.
Just rapping like here. You know what I mean? Like listen, if you listen to Unknown MC is Comanche Sly, and he was in the 80s. He was in a rap group in the fucking 80s, and that's how he's rapping on garage. But because it's sped up, it's sounding cutty, it's sounding naughty, and it's sounding good. You know what I mean? Like if you take any of those old school garage MCs and put them on hip hop beats, it's a joke, But then after the whole pirate, so 94, 95, 96, pirate radio was the main thing where everybody got their music from, and that was part of the whole anti-establishment thing. And
this was when Kiss FM was illegal.
Yeah,
I remember when Kiss was an illegal radio
so it's like
station.
Cool FM, Rinse FM,
Sunrise.
Origin FM, Mac, Ice FM, 88.1 or 88.3 in that was like north sides. But then that's when garage really got widespread to all the kids, because there was jungle, and jungle was the thing, because suddenly this is like the MC culture made it a bit more competitive, and that translated to
jungle was wild. Yeah, like jungle came out the rave era, and I got to be honest, I didn't go in that direction.
Yeah.
I went down the house music route because I remember you would go to some big house music events, and they'd have a jungle room.
Yeah,
and I remember walking there, and I'm just like,
yo, it's scary.
It was scary. It was scary. It was like,
Yeah,
you know, and everyone's thinking,
like,
I'm not coming out of there
moving
alive.
a lot. You know what I'm saying? You don't want everyone's got clean shoes. You don't step on the wrong guy's shoes. That was the gangster
and it was
room,
very,
basically.
yes, and it was very angry. And I remember being like a 20-year-old, sort of 18 to 20-year-old. So I'm going to say it like white kid.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking I'm not coming out of there
Yeah,
alive.
yeah. So this is the thing, right? So then that was the jungle energy, which was very much like standard. It was like what hip hop was in, you know, it was like 90s hip hop. It was dangerous, you know. It was, but that mixed with dancehall culture, that mixed of like there was, you know, in London, Rude Boys was a thing. You know what I'm saying? I don't think people know now, bruv. You used to go to fucking Piccadilly Circus, yeah. Leicester Square, which is pretty much the Dubai Mall of London.
Yes.
And you would get robbed.
100%.
You would get robbed. Like you would, like, you know what I mean? Like, or you'd have to stand your ground, you know what I'm saying? And everybody was there trying to smoke, you know, do this and that. But like, bruv, you would be in Oxford Street, you would get robbed. You would go over here, there'd be like a group of men who was ready, because there was no surveillance, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to get money. And the thing is that was like the bad boy culture at the time, which was from, you know, what was going on in Jamaican dancehall music, but then also the UK subculture, which has always had a history of like, you know, confrontation vibes, and then hip hop culture, you know? So like, there was just gangs. Look, bruv, you would go anywhere you would go, you would get robbed, bruv. You'd be outside Harrods, you get robbed.
Well,
I personally, we got held up a few times, but I managed to flex. But you know, I've had to save my friends from, like my white friends. I've had to like fucking rap my way out of us getting happy slapped and shit like that, you know? So,
well, I lived in Tottenham in 95 when I was 19 with my mates. And there was a club on Tottenham High Street.
Yeah.
I think it was called the UN, Club UN.
Club UN.
And they had a tank outside the front. They would have a tank.
Dude, that was there
and it was a massive jungle club. And I never went in because it scared the absolute shit out of me as I'd walk past. They had a big tank outside the front. Everyone was in army dress.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
okay, so check this out.
That was a proper jungle club.
Yeah, so check this out. This is interesting. Now, you said that jungle was there'd be the big house raves with like Brandon Block and whoever.
Yes. Yeah.
And then boom, they'd have the jungle room.
Because the rave era was adjusting to sort of...
So becoming club culture.
Yeah.
Right. Now, but obviously that housey stuff was, you know, like that hard, like Sasha Digweed, Paul Fold, Brandon Block. We can name all the names, whatever, Carl Cox even. Now, the jungle room's a small room, right? Jungle, he's growing and growing. Pirate radio, it's all the junglers who are about, you know, like who want to, you know, they're more kind of sidelined. You haven't got Judge Jules on Radio 1 playing your shit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you've got, they're the ones who's going to do the whole pirate flex, right? So from the acid house side of things into the jungle, now people want jungle. All the kids in all the schools are into that 95, 96, 97, that was the first year that decks and mics outsold guitars in school. You know, kids used to play guitar. Nah, all the kids want decks.
Everyone wants to be a DJ.
Now, in the jungle raves, now jungle raves are massive, right? We're looking 94, 95, 96. In the jungle rave, the small room is the garage room. So you've got all it, like, you know, playing all of this sexy 4-to-the-floor garage in there, right? Which is the house music, but it's a bit more black and it's a bit more skippy. But like, because it's that sexy garage, now you've got everyone dressed up in there. The big shotters are in there. Do you know what I mean? Like all the little shotters are running around the rave selling rare. But the big boys are in there having a laugh with all the money, with the champagne, with the girls. You know, they want a bit more sexy music. You know, and that's also where the style comes from, where everyone in garage is wearing skinny jeans and
everyone
loafers.
started wearing shoes.
Do you know what I mean? They're wearing their snakeskin loafers.
Yeah,
Everyone was wearing the polo Michelle, Ralph Lauren. You know, it was that's where the kind of, that's when it was like, no cats, no trainers. You know, they keep the riffraff outside now.
Yeah.
But from that, but then that's where the MCs are in there vibing, you know, because all the MCs are in the jungle room. That's like Stevie Hyper D, Skibbity going more and more mad, Trigger, Bassman going more and more mad every time. But then in the garage room, you got like, but people still want to rap, chat, so they'll be doing it a little bit, and that's kind of where like the little cheeky little flows come from. But now, obviously, pirate radio, jungle garage is right there, because all the big jungle tape sets used to come out in garages there's 2 tapes in there, which are the garage tapes, right?
One of the things that, so of everything you said, like, and you moved into the electro era. This was the thing. You went down the electro sort of direction. And as a fan, and a fan of big, heavy, you know, noise-related music, like sort of almost stuff with real passion behind it. Like I said before, where they want to come out on stage and just blow everybody away. It was when you've done tracks like Apex, scatter with Skrillex, still getting it, this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you, when you get given like the finished article, do you look at it and just go, fucking hell? Or because you made it, do you just sort of go, oh, it's another tune? I don't know. Like,
Yeah, the way that we approach anything has always been like, put the beat on, we'll write some bars, we'll rap on it.
so
See what it takes, because obviously there's different like, you know, you can't put a grind beat on it and just get a rapper on it and he's gonna rap on it and it sound all right. You need to understand what's what, you know, and you need to dedicate time to that. You know, like back in the days, you couldn't put a garage MC on a hip hop beat because a lot of them would just sound foolish. The way you can't get a rapper and put him in a jungle rave, you know, it's not going to run. He doesn't know how to work the mic properly, or the crowd, or the culture of when you chat, when you don't chat, all of that.
So when you started working with Skrillex, like, did he send you stuff? Because that is a very unique individual that came along at a very unique time, and that is just simply noise on a whole new level.
So the thing is, I had some immigration issues in the UK, so I had to leave, but I couldn't be based in Dubai because it'd be too expensive to keep touring. So I moved to Holland, and so actually when I got turned away at the border, we had some shows in Holland and Belgium, so I just went to there. Like when I got to Groningen for Walter's house, Sonny had arrived the same day, and they were like, "Oh, this is Sonny Skrillex. He's come from America. He's decided to shelve his album and he wants to work with some electronic producers. He's come to meet Noisia and Borgor and Mustard Seed." So we was there for a few days, and I pissed off. I came back here, went on tour, Australia, New Zealand, and I was like, right, I can't sit in Dubai with no visa and keep this career popping. So I moved in with Noisia, but then he decided that he wanted to work with Noisia as well. So we moved into the house together. So we were living together, and then we were showing each other lots of stuff. And this was the period where, you know, like Dubstep, you know, it was just after Where's My Money had come out. And actually it was a little bit after Where's My Money and, you know, Cockney Saga come out. And it was just starting to go into this, you know, he showed me about this group called Horse the Band. And then you got groups like Bear. It was just Circus Records. You know, we were still looking at, I was still talking to Flux Pavilion on MySpace. Mm-hmm. You know, artists were still put, like, the front line for music was still MySpace these days. So it was like 2009, 2010. So I'm living there. So then I'm starting to show him loads of UK stuff. So, but he was making an album with Noisia. And I think to date, this might be one of the best rock and roll electronic crossover albums that was ever made. You know, it's been shelved because of issuis. You know, we was even on there. But
sounds criminal that is being
just from hearing it in the studio being made, I remember all the hooks, all the songs is going out of my head, the switches. Anyway, it was a combination of like what Ed Banger was doing, what Dubstep was doing, and what Noisia was doing with Sonny's vocals on it sounding like fucking Michael Jackson. Like it's just different levels of, you know. But anyway, so that got shelved. Everything happens for a reason. So in the meanwhile, you know, I'd introduce him to Bear Noise. Danny Bear Noise is another kid from Dubai. You know what I'm saying? He was in school with David, you know what I'm saying? David's Fair Service.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway, so I seen them on MySpace. I'm like, who the hell are these guys? And the clock is a kid from Dubai. I'm like, get the fuck out of here, dude. Anyway, so he started sending beats back and forth, and I showed Sonny Bear Noise, and then they just started talking. I introduced him to Schism, who runs Never Say Die Records. Just who were like the people who I knew he was messing with that sound. I was like, chat to this geezer. Anyway, so I'm back here. Bear Noise sent me, Sonny sends me this tune. And I'm like, oh, he's like, yeah, it's a tune that Bear Noise has started and sent him. It's like the early primordial version of Scatter. I'll send it to you after this so you can hear it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is naughty.
It is though, isn't it?
But
Scatter.
It wasn't as naughty as it is. You know what I'm saying? It was still acceptable. It was reasonable. You know what I mean? It could still get played in a dubstep rave, you know?
Yeah, I don't know where you play Scatter.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a whole bunch of people who would never have played Scatter when it came out. Anyway, so he sent me this beat, and I'm like, what, it's Bear Noise? And the thing is, I was also in Dubai at the time, and I was like, this is deep, because this is a Dubai kid who's made this beat. Send it to Sonny. Sonny sent it to me, saying, I want to get you on this. again, Ebo is getting more and more fed up with doing electronic stuff.
Okay.
At this point, actually, no, I don't think so, because this is like, you know, the noisier stuff had popped off. We'd been on tour with the Prodigy. We've done, you know, we've seen the whole thing go up and up and up. You know, it's before the Skrillex thing where it'd gone super spaz level. You know, but we were out.
It's a great way of saying Skrillex's music.
Yeah.
Super spaz.
No, I mean, no, I think
It's
it's like
wild.
It was the level of where it
just
went
nuts.
to after.
Yeah.
I wasn't referring to the music itself, but yeah, the music did spaz out as well. Anyway, so we do this tune. That's why in the beginning of the tune, I'm like, yo, LA, London, Dubai.
Yeah.
I recorded it at Danny Neville's house, who was my neighbor, who was incidentally, I know Danny, like my pops and Danny Neville's pops known each other from, you know, the 70s, you know, since before we were born, you know. So like I remember meeting Danny Neville when I was like 9 or 10 years old in a restaurant in Quay, and we used to dance. And we were looking at him like, what's this dancing? Because we was like in the rock and roll music, you know what I mean? So anyway, so then I remember seeing him later and be like, what, you're a DJ, we're music. So we obviously just stayed in touch for all these years. So it was like, I need studio, boom, went to Danny's house, recorded it there, sent it back. He's like, right, Noisier were telling me, they're like, yo, this whole shit's getting, you know, they were just breaking down the whole, because they just signed to Joe Oakley's management, and Joe Oakley looked after Chase the Status, Noisier partnership, Pendulum, and somebody else, Subfocus. He was looking after those 4 artists, right? So then he kind of just made that little conglomerate of the biggest drum and bass artists pushing the bounds, right?
Yeah.
Noisier roped into that with a co-management deal. They'd run out of budget, so they came to loggerheads basically, because it was like on big balls with the management that, you know, between Joe Oakley and, you know, and the Blood Company. So they were like, all right, it was shelved. But then Sonny he made the whole Scary Monsters Nice Sprites at the time when we were in the studio with Noisy. I remember he had the little side room, so when they were working on bits, he'd come back here and be like, doing all of that stuff, you know, because the stuff that's on there isn't necessarily, that doesn't really have Noisy as name, you know, brand on it. But then there's the remixes that were brought on. So then he hit me up to do that tune, because I introduced him to Bear Noise. It kind of became a little family affair, really, that EP, of like the people who was around him, like a couple of his people from the States, and it was us, Noisier, Bear Noise, and yeah, they decided to drop it on Dead Mouse's label. He was homies with Dead Mouse. That's how he kind of got connected with Noisier. Then that's also how like he connected me with Tommy Lee from Motley Crue. Just like this, just weird, just shit that's just happening
that's
all
crazy.
over the place, bro.
It's an
And he
amalgamation.
just connects me with like, so I'm like, what? I'm on a train because I'm not allowed to be in England, kind of living in exile, but suddenly I'm chatting to Tommy Lee from Motley. It was just weird.
Yeah.
You know, and then we got this tune signed to Ministry of Sound, which they're saying is going to go top 10. Anyway, it was just weird times, you know, like extreme like losses and extreme wins at the same time. You just got to, that's the thing about music industry. It's like, just got to roll with whatever it is. You can't get too excited and you can't get too upset, man. You just got to just be like, all right, what's happening next, you know?
Well,
so
go on.
coming back to this. So coming back to this situation. So I'm in Dubai, sends me this tune by a Dubai guy. And I'm like, yo, what? So we do the tune. So I had to shout out Dubai on the tune. And then basically because there was a deadlock with the album, they put it on Dead Master label. Now at this point, the streaming services were in some weird place. iTunes was there. It was kind of becoming Apple Music. They didn't know what was going on. People aren't really downloading anymore from iTunes because where the fuck do you put it? There's no CD players anywhere. What are you going to do? Download it and burn it and take it? You know what I mean? It's like they stopped putting CD players in computers, so now it's MP3. But it was just a weird time, and Spotify had just come out, so there was no playlist or algorithm. What is this Spotify weird shit now? Do you know what I mean? So there was this weird point in time where do you get music from? You're not going to HMV. No one's buying records. No one's buying CDs. There's no more CD players and things. Mini disc came and done.
Yeah.
So it's like, where are we at now? Where do we discover? How do we discover music? All the magazines are dead. Blogs, what? Like, you know, like. Anyway, so then YouTube was popping for stuff, but for discovery, I don't know, what do you do? So now, but then Beatport had come out, which was a real DJ friendly place. So this was like, I think Beatport was the only place where people were putting money down and buying music. So as electronic music was become, I don't know I feel sorry for every other genre because they didn't have a Beatport, you know what I mean? Maybe there was a few things for hip hop and stuff. Or there was like mixtapes. People would, but then there was free downloads for mixtapes, you know. But Bandcamp, I guess. But because it was such a sick ecosystem and the algorithms are there, what they did, they put the album out on Beatport, and they put it on Beatport exclusive. So Deadmau5 was the biggest artist in the world. He had the hottest label in the world at the time. And then they put the whole album out on there. Sonny Moore was a famous person already. The music was groundbreaking, but because the fact it was just on Beatport only meant that that's the only place you can get it. And then he's got his thousands, hundreds of thousands of fans from elsewhere who can only get it from Beatport. So now the whole album is just sitting at the top of Beatport 100 with this fucking mad new version of Dubstep, which is just fucking pissing everybody off. Kind of Fuck You, which is very punk as well. But that, and it just sitting there for almost a fucking year and a half, just changed the game.
It's a wild album.
Changed the game.
You know
like, so like, I remember when he put that out, and then a few months later decided he wants to do a tour. Bro, he announces a tour, sells out 52 or 62 dates in about 5 minutes. And I'm talking stadiums, you know, like across the whole of America, you know? Which is mad. Anyway, sorry.
No, look, I mean, look, I could talk to you all day. No,
so it's,
and I could, but we've got to sort of wrap this up. I mean, one thing I always like to sort of end these podcasts on is that I always like to think that if there's like, I don't know, like teenage kids wants to be an MC, you know what I mean? Genuinely, you've been, in my opinion, all the way to the very top, you know what I mean? In someone to listen to, and especially with Metropolis as well, the thing I thought was always fantastic is how different your voices were and stuff like that on the tracks. But what would you say to somebody that wants to come up through it? To what would you say? What's the piece of gold you could drop on them?
What I would say is there's a few things, right? First of all, if you love it and you want to do it, you create your own reality. So you can do it. No matter what anybody tells you can't do it. The way I looked at it, I was like, what? That guy can do it. Why can't I do it? Do you know what I'm saying? I love this. Who's going to try to tell me I can't do it? Watch me. You know what I mean? So in life, you decide what no is going to be the no that stops you. Do you know what I'm saying? Oh, you can't get a visa because, okay, cool, let me figure out a way to do it, you know? So it's never going to be easy, and it's never going to be the path that you think it's going to be. And, you know, you will get hit with an obstacle that will send you way back over here. But that's just the parameters that you didn't know about, you know what I mean? So if you want to do it, if anybody else can do it, it's been done before. You can even do stuff that nobody's done before. That's how these things happen. How much do you love it? How much do you want it? You know? And you got to do whatever it takes. Secondly, I would say just don't set your standards low. Do you know what I'm saying? If you really want to do anything in this world, it's got to be world class. If you want that world class recognition, or if you want to, again, as I was saying, respect the art form, you know, bring something to the table that no one else is bringing to the table, or do it in a way that, you know, shows that you are meant to be here. Do you know what I mean? You're not just piggybacking on something. You're bringing something to the table and opening doors for other people to come through as well, you know? The more people doing this, or the more people accepting this, you know, like now, if you look at it, like to be an artist, to be a musician is an accepted lifestyle, you know what I mean? There's people who can go to school to study electronic music production, you know? 20 years ago, it wasn't that. So by people believing in it so much, they've created an industry for it, whereby this is a life path that people can choose. You know, there's people probably grown up, gone to school, went straight to school for electronic music engineering, and that's all they've done in their whole life now. Back in the day, that was like something you had to fight for. You had to really like forge that path. But then by doing you create these new pathways for other generations to come through.
Pav, thank you so much.
Man.
I think it's been brilliant, and I feel blessed to have had this time to actually talk to someone like yourself.
You too, bro. Cheers for having me, man.
100%, man.
Thank you.